Welcome to Not Suitable for Democracy. I'm your host, Nick, and today we're going to be mixing things up a bit for our 30th episode. So, with that said, I know we talk about politics at the national level, local level, even right here in a store in New York. But today, I'd like to share some shows on Netflix. Yes, political shows that may pique your interest as much as they interest me. So, with that said, we are going to jump into 3 shows to commemorate our 30th episode. So, there's a lot to be said about each one of these shows, and yes, reviews have been mixed out there, but maybe you'll have a different take. Yes, it's December after the long Thanksgiving weekend where I had plenty of time to watch these 3 shows: Death by Lightning, The Diplomat Season 3, and Stranger Things Season 5, Part 1. So even though Stranger Things isn't technically a political show, there is a lot of commentary about our world today, and it was inspired by political events. So we're going to get back into the news in the coming weeks because there's so much going on. We know the Trump administration might have actually committed war crimes, allegedly. We know that the special election in Tennessee is a very close race, much closer than ever anticipated, which is great for Democrats. We also have, on a local level, we know that Governor Hochul is, getting ready for a primary, but the state assembly is also getting ready for their primary elections, which we will be seeing candidates in AD 34 for state assembly. But also, when Zohar Mamdani is sworn in to become our next mayor, his state assembly seat will become vacant, calling for a special election in February 2026. So, we have a lot to cover between now and then. So, if you like what you hear and want to learn more, make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy. You can subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Don't forget to follow along on social media, both on Instagram and TikTok. I use the same handle for both, so you can follow along at NSFD_pod. Now, their first show, Death by Lightning. It is a limited series, meaning there's no second season, and there will be only 4 episodes, each one roughly an hour. So, Death by Lightning is basically about the very quick meteoric rise of the 20th President of the United States, James Garfield. And it was all about the election of 1880. Now, it was very interesting at the time because if you think about James Garfield, right, we barely know much about him, right? He's not exactly talked about today the same way like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. Some can even argue, obviously, FDR, JFK, right, and so forth. But James Garfield, don't sleep on him, because what I learned from that limited series was just how powerful his legacy really is, despite being in office for only 120 days. Now, even though it was such a short term in office, right, didn't even complete a full term, for those who don't know, it was because he was assassinated. And yes, the show also portrays, how that came about. So just understanding that it's about the rise of James Garfield and, of course, his tragic demise. It's very interesting to take us back into a moment in time. Now, let's paint the picture, right? Like, many people might not know who James Garfield is, but he campaigned on very progressive views for the Republican Party. Now, it's not like I'm really trying to champion the Republican Party here, but hear me out. Yes, the Civil War has ended, but racism still existed. That was one of a very inconvenient truth that still plagues the North, right? We know even though the North was part of the Union, right, fighting for the Union, they weren't perfect, and that becomes clear in the show. So at a time when there's still a lot of, tension between the North and South, we also know that political dynasties and even favoritism, right, like pay-to-play politics, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. That style of politics was very, very prevalent, and that was the standard, the status quo of the day. Okay, politics and government in 1880. What went down? So James Garfield, he was a congressman from Ohio. Now, still, we know it today as a mostly a red state, right? It used to be a swing, but now it's red. Well, being that it did have Republican roots there, right? We know that James Garfield did a really good job in Congress where, he became not like the top leader, but he did make a name for himself just through his own virtue. So the way the show starts out is actually through the Republican convention. Now, it's not like the RNC as we know it today, where the candidate talks his head off for like 2 hours on a speech, but instead, James Garfield, who is played by Michael Shannon. Now, just quick tangent here for those of you who also watch Hulu shows. Michael Shannon was the father in Nine Perfect Strangers season 1, and the father of the family who had lost their child to suicide. So just remember that character, Michael Shannon. If you've seen him in Nine Perfect Strangers, which Nicole Kidman is that, and she does a fabulous job. But Michael Shannon, he's the father, and he tries to keep the family together. He's, really tries to be like happy-go-lucky because he's, grappling with the loss of his son. But I paint that picture for you because that character will come in very handy for when Michael Shannon has to play James Garfield. James Garfield was known to become virtuous and, lead with his values, but also just being a very level-headed man who understood and personified honor, respect, dignity, not showmanship where it was like what Trump is, where it shows off and brags and boasts, but more so to be a gentleman, to be a man with respecting others and respecting women and respecting people of color, right? These are such honorable values that he encapsulated so perfectly. So the show starts off with the election of 1880 in the Republican convention. So it's really the party elites, right, that come from all over the states. And remember, this wasn't all 50 states at this point. It was only like half the states. So they had to, make their trip in their bug and carry or their train, and then eventually to have to vote for who they thought was going to be the next president of the United States to represent the Republican Party. Now, mind you, the Republican Party was they were the good guys back then a little bit, where they actually they were the progressive party. The party of Lincoln, that was the party of Lincoln. And 25 years later or 15 years later, 1865. So that was the party of Lincoln still. And mind you, at the time, Ulysses S. Grant, he was the general of the Union Army. He was in charge. He won the Civil War. So he ran for president after the war, and then he won re-election. So at this convention, he was about to be nominated for an unprecedented third time. Because he was fairly well liked, and obviously as a war hero, that still played very well across the country. So Republicans at that time wanted to nominate Ulysses S. Grant, and he would be the president again. That was the projected path. And they thought, it'd be an easy win. Everyone knows him, name recognition. He's done a decent job. Great. What could go wrong? Well, at this convention, believe it or not, James Garfield was actually there to support a friend who was running, who wanted to be nominated for president. Now, in some random skerfuffle, right, they wound up having James Garfield actually come up to really talk about why the current Republican Party wasn't necessarily going in the right direction. There was still a lot of corruption because of the pay to play. People weren't necessarily satisfied fully with the state of the country, and they weren't feeling the same hope and joy that Ulysses S. Grant initially brought them. So James Garfield called it out, and he went into this really poignant, beautifully spoken speech. And he basically just laid it all out there. Be like, we are the party. Well, I shouldn't be championing Republicans here, but I guess my point is the values he was standing for, that was to be applauded. Saying the party of honor, the party of the people, and the party of, making life better with a vision that people can get behind. Those are admirable things that people would gladly pay into. And remember, 1880, this was on the cusp of the Gilded Age in America. So, like, extreme wealth was already starting to, like, just extract itself from, like, the general public, where, like, the rich got richer and the poor stayed poorer. So, like, that was starting to become more prevalent at that time. James Garfield knew that. He was progressive minded. And from that amazing speech he gave, one person in the crowd actually nominated him for the presidency, or actually voted for him for the nomination to be president. And once that happened, it was a young congressman from the North, and it just spoke to this young gentleman. And he was just so, like, inspired by his words. He's like, you know what? You're right. This is how we should move forward. And from that moment, it then was the catalyst for a series of votes where the final nominee needed to have, like, a healthy majority, right? And it wasn't until several days of this where the final where James Garfield, like, didn't throw himself in the running until he was kind of forced to by chance, because more and more people wanted him. So long story short, we know how that turned out, right? James Garfield won the nomination when originally not wanting to become president. But why? Because he had a strong message and a vision. Two things that are very important to this day that candidates still don't even understand. But yes, message and vision. And the fact that he was running with honor, it just made me realize how it's so rare to find that in politics these days, let alone at the presidential level. And he was that. He was the ideal candidate. And yes, it was the Republican Party, but this is when times were very different. So the fact that we did have a president who was honorable, who knew dignity, and actually really wanted to see progressive America, like James Garfield, when he won the nomination, the rest of the show, it talks about how he campaigned on making sure, Black Americans were truly free. So the fact that, that was so risque at the time, it was even dangerous, but he knew it was the right thing to do. And we're still fighting that in our politics today. Yeah, we really did have a great president. We may never really get to know him, but I just respect anyone who holds their values like that with honor, virtue, dignity, and just kindness, respect for everyone. Like that, it just means so much, especially in today's world. So if you have, about 4 hours to spare, hour an episode, and you watch Death by Lightning, highly recommend it. I give it a 9 out of 10. For me, for political wonks, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Maybe not everyone would agree, but I definitely think it was 9 out of 10. I thought it was great. So now, if you're looking for something that's a little more serious, but also modern day and completely fictional, then you might want to check out The Diplomat. Diplomat Season 3 just came out, so I had some time to catch up on the new season, and it was fantastic. Now, Diplomat has 3 seasons. There are 8 episodes in Season 1, 6 episodes in Season 2, and another 8 episodes in Season 3. So, Season 3, I think by far is the best season of the series. The main point of the show is it's all about an American diplomat, Kate Wyler, played by Kerry Russell, and she has her job in the American Embassy in the United Kingdom, based in London. So, with that said, you'll notice there's a lot of American and UK culture just kind of intertwined. Again, great scenery, especially in the UK, between Scotland and even the city of London. Now, for those of you who may recall, right, it's all about the not the adventures, but the experiences of Kate Wyler from season 1, who no real spoilers here because by season 3 you would have gotten to this point, who had to figure out what was happening with how the naval ship had actually exploded. What happened there? So what we find out through season 1 is Kate Wyler is this really focused, determined, not necessarily ambitious, but just a really good public servant where she is doing her job the best she can, and being the diplomat, her whole gift is being able to find these diplomatic solutions that keeps everybody happy, with the least amount of harm. but also is like very like savvy and like pretty sharp. Now, granted, Kate Wyler, is married to her husband, Hal Wyler. And Hal, he is very different than Kate. He is kind of like a bull in a China store, where like he is always coming up with like thinking outside the box, taking big political risks, and even really like very ambitious. That becomes very clear. So in season one, the whole like behind his whole like storyline is like obviously he used to be a diplomat, he's not anymore, or he used to be an ambassador, not anymore. Now Kate Wyler, she is like the ambassador, and she's like of the couple, like still in politics and like working on her career. So those questions in politics where it's like, where do you draw the line of like play by the rules, and how do you like really navigate that, especially when there are so many challenges, and like it's all about gaining trust, earning trust, and just like keeping that trust, but also at the expense of like you can like be nice to your friend but then piss off your boss. But then if your boss is like what, a president or like an ambassador, like yeah, those are like really tough calls, because regardless of what happens like between on a person to person level, like that could influence world events. And that becomes very clear in The Diplomat. Now, season 3, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but like it was so good how they came to the final like episode, and like basically what has to go down is like it I like season 3 because it doesn't focus on the same exact plot line from season 1 and 2. Like it's still a part of the show, but it's like not all about it. So the fact that like President Penn, who is played by Allison Janney, for those of you West Wing fans, she is in this and she is really, really good. There's a like a pretty infamous scene in season 2 where basically Allison Janney has to explain to Kate Wyler like why that British ship had to explode. And basically it's like she like takes a giant map and she takes this like piece of flint from the fireplace, and then she like draws like, well, this is how Russia could attack us, and like these are all the bases, and like what would you do if you had an opening and Russia knew that you could attack the United States? Like, would you want control of that naval base so you can keep American ships there, and would you want to fortify the base and keep Scotland unified, or would you rather just say good luck? And then Kate Wyler was like, yeah, I would do the same. And it's a pretty iconic scene because it just shows like the ferociousness and the fierceness, but like political calculation. That's like, I mean, that's what we really need in a president, right? Like someone who is going to be so politically calculating that it's like things 10 steps ahead of our adversaries, right? Like the guy in the White House right now is not thinking 10 steps ahead, and he's quite unpredictable and risky, and like that is not good for American diplomacy, let alone foreign relations. I mean, that's just objective fact. So that being said, if you really want to see what like a true like smart leader looks like, Allison Janney as Grace Penn in The Diplomat for sure. So Kate Wyler, right, season 3, she's now navigating like her marriage, in the sense that in season 2 they're like separated because that was the only way they could really continue their jobs, being like, we're gonna be together in public for the spotlight because she's because she's the second lady, right? 'Cause she's married to the vice president. But then also their marriage is like over, so she's like, I'm not going to be married to you behind the scenes, and we're gonna have fun with whoever we want. And she does, and she winds up having a new boyfriend who is the basically like a spy on the Russians, and he knows all about the submarine plot that's going on in season 3. So they're actually like a pretty good dynamic, right? And you see how like Kate has been just broken down by her husband, played by Rufus Seawright, who's really good in the show. He has a British accent, but in the show he actually plays American, so it's quite interesting. But yes, so like their tumultuous relationship, marriage, like it's just has shaped her into be like this like horrible girlfriend, I guess, or like she's not like abusive, but like she just doesn't know how to show care and like think that the person is being genuine and like trust the person, right? So all those issues that like Hal totally just broke in seasons 1 and 2. So now when she's trying to date this new guy, he's like, whoa, like you're thinking, I'm not Hal. Like, remember that. One other thing of context, Grace Penn's husband questioned why is Hal so close to you? Why are you and Hal so chummy? And like he thinks they're having an affair, but like what really is they're very much on the same page, and that is actually quite scary. Just seeing how their characters are, because you're like, ooh, they are very like smart, sharp, intelligent, but like maybe a little too smart for their own good. But it fascinates me because I'm like, this is how you kind of have to think if you're gonna like, you know, really outsmart people who are trying to outsmart you, especially in like playing. They say like 3D chess, 4D chess, whatever it is. But like, yeah, they really do. And it just leaves for an amazing cliffhanger because you don't know how season 4 is going to play out. And I'm happy to say that it's official. Season 4 is on its way. The cast is going to be filming season 4 in a few weeks. No word on yet when season 4 will drop, but I do know that production is underway. So super excited for season 4 of The Diplomat. I hope we get 8 episodes. I highly recommend season 3. I really enjoyed it. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I know that a lot of people probably expect more humor, more like fast paced, but like more, more entertainment, so to speak. But I really enjoyed watching The Diplomat. For me, like it's really dry, muscular script, and like it's really like sharp. Kind of like Veep, but with a little less humor. Like the humor is very subtle in The Diplomat. So I know like that's usually a drawback for people. Like I love Veep. That's another political show I actually love. And Veep is like very funny. It's all about the comedy. Whereas like this show, it's like just very subtle, dry, which isn't everyone's taste, which is fine. But for me, I really enjoyed watching The Diplomat season 3. I hope you do too on Netflix. And lastly, we have Stranger Things Season 5 Part 1. Now, for those of you who maybe never heard of Stranger Things, now this show has been out on Netflix since July 15th, 2016. It has been around for so long, but you know what? It's become a global phenomenon where people around the world are waiting to see what happens to Vecna and will the typical cast finally win and get out of the upside down. What I'm loving about season 5 right now is so it just dropped Thanksgiving weekend, and my husband and I, we watched the entire thing. So we're already done with the first 4 episodes of season 5, part 1. And for the reason why I say it like that is because part 2 is dropping on December 25th, Christmas Day, and then the very last episode of the series, not season, series, is dropping on New Year's Eve. So what a way to end the show. It's going to be fantastic. I think it's an hour and a half, that last episode alone. And they make these episodes like real cinematic, like masterpieces. Like I have to say, the last episode, I guess season 4, the last episode of season 5, part 1, which was the last episode 4, they really made some of the endings feel like a video game with the fighting and the fast action, just like jam packed one after another, and just having to like, really see all these multiple storylines, like not only going on, but then also converging. And then finally at the very end, when you see the plot twist, like new thing unlocked, and you're just like, what? It was just so crazy to see everything come together in that moment, and to see like, oh, this is changing now. Like, okay, we have like new things could be happening. So it makes me really excited for part 2 that's coming later this month. So what basically has been happening, like in the start of season 5, they've been trying to like find different areas of Hawken. Hawken is where they are, Hawken, Indiana. So they're trying to find where Vecna could be in the upside down world, like in Hawken. So from that, they have this plan, right? And they've been doing these plans like every I guess few weeks, days, whatever it is. until they eventually find where he is. Now, spoiler alert, plan goes awry, right? That's what makes it interesting. But from that, right, I don't want to give too much away, but from that, you start to see like how what used to be like smooth and steady and what used to be, you can trust and rely like, oh, this is how it's going to go. Well, nope. Now they have to think of plan B. They have to like work around that. And mind you, this is in an era, 1980s, with no cell phones. There was no iPhone to text your friend and be like, hey, I'll be there in 5 minutes, or hey, I'm missing. So, if a character doesn't show up, like they were just thinking, oh, he might be okay. He's just taking forever. Or he could be dead. You don't know. So, like, it's one of those things where, we take for granted that we have instant communication because we're always connected between social media, iPhones, what have you. Yeah, but back then, you really had to rely on trust. Like, or just hope that someone would, show up on time, and hope that things would work out a certain way, and hope that, bad things wouldn't happen. Yeah. So it's almost like when you think about it, right? It's interesting how, like, because it was built into the culture, like hope and trust were built in to how we like navigated like interactions with each other, especially when separated. And now, because we're just so interconnected, like social media and iPhones, like we've eroded that trust and that hope. And like obviously with our politics and the climate of it, like that doesn't help either. But as much as like internet tried to connect us, like the show is a good example of what it's like to just rely on the kindness of people and being nice to one another to really help move things. Um, yeah, and it's just so interesting, especially because this is all based in the 1980s. Now, granted, like it's a fictional show, right? Like there are no demogorgons, whatever they're called. Vecna's not real, right? But what is real about Stranger Things, are the mind control programs that the US government spent millions of dollars creating, curating, and as far as we know, maybe still working on. Who knows? Allegedly. But I guess my point is the show was inspired by real government projects based in, the 20th century. Now, this was all after, like, or during the Cold War, after WW2, where there was a fear or a concern that the Soviet Union and the United States would take hold of mind controlling, not powers, but like science, right? If the United States or Soviet Russia or Soviet Union knew how to control minds, right? Then that would be game over, right? Like you would then control the other person's government, control their people, and then you would have control of the world. That's essentially what the fear was. So from that, there were two projects that were happening, allegedly. There was Project Montauk, which was based in Montauk, Long Island, where allegedly there were experiments being done on children. So that was a real thing. Now, were they being kidnapped? Allegedly, but that was a real thing. Now I'll share this, and I'll share why I know that's a real thing. So one of the other projects going on was Project MK Ultra, and MK Ultra also, again, another part of it where they were doing mind control experiments, trying to figure out like how to manipulate someone's mind, but how to control another person's. But also, like, this was through the use of psychedelics, right? Like LSD. So, like, who were the people that were being experimented on? Like, was it people that were in prison? Was it people that were captured and, like, taken, like, without their consent, right? Like, there's probably a lot going on that we don't know. But what we do know is that these government programs were real. The US government did spend millions of dollars trying to figure out mind control on its citizens in hopes of preventing that technology from falling into the hands of the Russians. That is true because that was declassified by the Senate in 1977. So Stranger Things may be fake, but the mind control programs that are featured in the show, those are real. So, there were scenes where like Elle had to be like strapped down. There were scenes where she had to be like submerged in water. That all very much happened to other people, whether they were children or adults. Like, that was a thing. So it's pretty wild to think like Stranger Things may be fictional and it may have commentary about the world around us, but like, yeah, it was actually inspired by real events. So take that what you will. This is why we talk about our politics and things going on, and that way we stay informed. Because I'm talking about like, oh, back then we used to trust things more, and like this gives me more reason not to trust our government, right? So that's why we got to get good people in there so you don't make decisions like this. And yeah, it was declassified in 1977. So yeah, it actually happened. You can look that up. It is true. So long story short, Stranger Things season 5. I am super excited for the next part because what they've shown so far was really, really good. I also have to share one more good thing. I value how this show, it makes, how do I say it? They do a really good job letting the audience in on sexuality, same sex, right? Love, and relationships. And I say that because there's a lesbian character who has a queer romance with another candy striper, a nurse. And then even more so, where it kind of leans into one of the main characters, one of the four guys. Like in real life, he's openly gay. So like in the show, he like leans into that more. But my point is like the lesbian character and the openly gay character, like, or he's not openly gay, but like lesbian character and the gay character in Stranger Things season 5 both have a conversation kind of about like, how do you feel? How do you know? And those are like, I'm speaking vaguely because that is what the show is trying to convey, where you don't have to be explicit. And our culture, I think, makes like sexuality like very explicit sometimes, and like, to be frank, not everyone understands that. So it's like starting slow, understanding just at a basic level, but more so it's because it's not so explicit, it invites you in to understand the human psychology of it. Like, what would it mean to actually sense if someone else felt the same way as you? What does it mean to experience love but then having a challenging time trying to share that love or be open about it because of all the environmental factors that are telling you no, 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 no? And like that, listen, that speaks to me 100%. So like, I love how Stranger Things does that because it does invite more people in without being like in your face or like, this is too much or I didn't sign up for this, right? Like, you know, it is like a kid's show about monsters at the end of the day. So it's not like, the rainbow flag was ever a part of the agenda, but it is nice to see how it is real life. Like, there were people in the 80s who were closeted. There were kids, guys and girls, and all sex and genders in between who were like, who had a coming out story or coming of age coming out story, right? So I think Stranger Things does a really good job of it. They they know they have a national audience and they do keep with the times. Like, they're teaching respect. They're teaching just accepting others regardless of who they are, like celebrating your eccentricities or your weirdness, right? Like, they do make a point of making sure the kids do come across as like feeling good about themselves, and or better yet, right? Using their mind, their intellect, their strengths, like physical strength, but also their intellectual strength to like solve these problems, right? Building confidence and self esteem for young kids to eventually grow up and be like, yeah, I can do that. I might not be the jock, but I am fast. I might not be like a bookworm, but I can think outside the box. And like, and those skills are just so important to teach like anyone, like kids, students, but then also adults. So I really appreciate that Stranger Things is like showing that, like how to instill and build confidence. And like, sure, it's a fictional show. It's like Elle isn't gonna, like, no child is gonna jump from one roof to another. Like, I would never recommend that. But my point being is like, this is a good display of how young kids can do better, be better in a healthy way. And I think Stranger Things really gets that. So, long story short, I'm just so excited to see Stranger Things out there. It's a really good show. If you haven't seen it, I know it's like, 32 hours of viewing if you haven't seen the series yet. But there are a few recommendations. There's like 2 episodes from season 2 and 2 episodes from season 4 that the Duffer Brothers, the original creators and producers, are sharing with people like, hey, you gotta watch those 2 episodes. And the 2 episodes from season 2, 2 episodes from season 4. Excuse me, I forget what they are, but like that's essentially how. Oh, actually, what was it? The last episode of season 4, the piggyback. That is one of the episodes they recommend for people to watch, which makes sense. That was right before the end, or right before the start of season 5. But also, it like kind of gives you an idea of like where they're at in their journey, and like I think taking it all in, right? 4 seasons of this like mystery world and adventure and all these characters. It's really great to see it come together. Season 5, lots of action. Season 5. The dialogue's pretty good. There's some like funny jokes in there, some more subtle than others, but also like showing the strength of women, feminist heroes. Right. Quick thing with Karen Wheeler. She does a great job protecting her daughter. I'll say that. And even though she's kind of painted as like a wine mom, she still knows how to throw a wine glass. Let's just say that. But yeah, end of the day, Stranger Things, highly recommend it. That, I'm going to say, like, I mean, I didn't say the last episode yet, or, the last chapter, last part, and then the last episode. But out of the 4 that were released, watching all of them, I am like 9.5, 10 out of 10. Like, I'm so excited. Like, I cannot wait to see the next episodes on coming up later this month. I know it's going to be good. I hope you find it as exciting as I do, especially because this series is just phenomenal. It's one of the best shows on TV, I swear. So until the next part comes out, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you enjoyed the red holiday lights behind me that do kind of look like Stranger Things. I didn't plan it that way, but it does kind of look like that, so it works. But yes, Stranger Things Season 3, Stranger Things Season 5, Part 1, The Diplomat Season 3, and Death by Lightning, all out on Netflix, and I highly recommend you check them out. And that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in to Not Suitable for Democracy. Now, if there's any political shows that you're watching right now or you're interested in, please let me know. Drop them in the comments, and I'll do my best to check them out sometime. We'll have more regularly scheduled news in later episodes, but until then, if you like what you heard and want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Again, if you want to leave me a message, then make sure to do so on Instagram or TikTok. I use the same handle for both, so you can follow along at NSFD_pod. Thanks again so much for tuning in. I really appreciate the support. Make sure to tell a friend, because that's how this channel grows. And remember, democracy is not suitable without you.